Hey everybody. On Monday, I was fortunate enough to be able to sit down with a couple of members of the Classic team and ask them half an hour's worth of questions about Phase 2 of Season of Discovery. I got a lot of those questions from my podcast community, so I hope you do enjoy them and enjoy the answers. As always, you can find more of me and more of my kind of content at Countdown to Classic. If you just search that wherever you get your podcasts, punch it into Spotify, you'll get a ridiculous amount of content all about Season of Discovery, guys. It's everything you've ever hoped and dreamed for. Just chill out, vibe with my crew. We sit down and just chat about this like we're at the pub for forever. It's really good sod content. I recommend it. Please do enjoy the interview. All right, so after a slight wardrobe malfunction, we're here with take two, and we're starting again with the Wrecking Crew, the Classic team, or, two members of the Classic team are here with us. We've got Josh Greenfield, you know him as a Grend. We got Tim Jones, you know him as Tim Jones. Boys, how are we?
Good.
Doing good.
That's the way. Look, you know the drill. Let's rip through this. So excited for Phase 2, guys. You guys are smashing it. You're quite aware of all the love and affection that the team is bathing in at the moment. So given how well SOD has been doing so far, first question, how quickly was the sequel greenlit after SOD's success? What are we talking here, guys? 24 hours, 48, Hollywood time? What are we thinking?
I don't really know how to answer that. I think everyone was very excited with how it went. Like we expected. I'm going to give you the I don't know how to answer that, so I'm going to give you a slightly different answer to a slightly different question and just say, I think we all expected it to be pretty successful, but we've definitely been blown away by how successful it's been. And whenever you hit that kind of success, it changes the way you kind of think about the future, and it might shift some plans. So can't really talk about what may have changed, if anything changed, but we're very happy with how it went.
Very good. No, I'm being a bit cheeky. That question wasn't on the list. I just wanted to get your reaction there. Look, guys, let's get into the questions that I did give you a sneak preview of. And what I did, everyone, is I reached out to the Countdown to Classic community and fielded a bunch of listener questions. So most of these aren't mine. They are from you guys, the community, and the guys are here ready to answer. I just want to say one quick thing. Streamers, if you're out there reacting to this, please just do me one really big solid. Just pause, Google, Spotify, Countdown to Classic. Throw me a little shout out for the podcast there. Let people know where they can find me, and we're all good. Okay, guys, let's get into it. First one's from CrewDef about Dishonorable Kills. Losing a rank from a single raid member killing a civilian appears a disproportional punishment, particularly during a dedicated PvP event like in Ashenvale. Are any revisions to the Dishonorable Kill system expected? I'm particularly concerned about the civilian mobs outside Gnomeregan and Dishonorable Kills in Elwyn during Dark Moon Fair.
Well, it's definitely something that we are sensitive to, and we have made some changes going into Phase 2. There were some spells from runes that did not care if they hit a civilian or PvP-enabled target. So things like Living Bomb, Living Flame, Explosive Shot. If you hit one of your enemies with that, they can't then run over to a civilian target and then bring them into the fray. So we've made changes like that. Did you want to add anything, Josh?
Yeah, it's mostly like this is something that we're keeping a close eye on. Like dishonorable kills have always been a little contentious, but they were definitely added for a reason back in 2005. We don't want to get into a situation where I don't know, the Horde just owns Red Ridge, indefinitely because they decide they want to just come take it over. It's like there's kind of like opportunities for good PvP, and then there's like, okay, we can't quest for like a day because the zone is just wholly owned by the other faction because they've decided to put down their stakes. And so that's something that we want to be really careful about. When any kind of decision we make around dishonorable kills or changing the functionality or removing them, it's not something we want to do lightly. Just because we don't want to create situations where you can basically grief the other faction, even on PvP servers where that thing is a little bit more okay. We just want to be careful about it.
All right. Next one's from Dildy. And this might be a quick answer. Has the Classic team talked about adding quality of life changes, such as you guys have seen this everywhere? Instant mail between your own account, 40-yard nameplates for non-PvP mobs, something like preparation of battlegrounds, clicking up weapon buffs, all the usual suspects.
So some of those things, I mean, the short answer is yeah, we've definitely talked about and are always talking about like what makes sense as a true quality of life addition to Classic. Some of them have uh, unexpectedly complicated technical reasons why they exist, like the weapon in view thing has a little bit of there's a little bit of dragons there in the code that we'd have to kind of fix in order to make that a little bit easier to use and easier to click off. But it's not to say we won't ever do it, but it might not be as simple as it superficially seems. There's also a couple of things in there, like the 41-yard nameplate distance. We kind of take a little exception to calling that a quality of life change. That's actually objectively a major systemic gameplay change.
Hmm.
And the thing that gives us pause about that is something like, if you go into a cave, for example, like a multi-level cave, if you have 41-yard nameplate distance, that drastically impacts the available information to you in terms of like what's above you on the other level, what's around a corner. And one of the things that we get a lot of comments and concerns that, oh, Season of Discovery is going to make the vanilla world too easy or less dangerous. Now, we don't think that's been the case. Like we definitely have made adjustments to the difficulty of the outdoor world, and I don't think many people actually, having played Phase One, really thought it was as easy as they maybe expected it to be. But that is the kind of thing that actually can make the world feel a lot easier. And while it might be annoying in the moment if you're a mage and you can't see a nameplate of something you're shooting from 35 yards away, and you might say, "Grr, Blizzard, they should change this. This is totally," it actually does have a lot of impact. And that's not to say we won't ever change it. It's just that's the kind of change that once we make it, we'll probably never be able to unmake it. So we have to be very, very careful and deliberate, because one of the things that we talk about a lot is that there's a lot of like what led from 2004, 2005 WoW to like modern World of Warcraft. There's a lot of iteration and improvement, but a lot of those changes didn't happen overnight. It was a ton of little things over time. And if we repeat every little thing, then pretty soon we're going to kind of be pretty close to where modern is in terms of like lack of friction and things like that. And players talk a lot about wanting a classic plus, but I don't know if many of them want a modern minus. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like, that doesn't necessarily, I mean, that doesn't seem super exciting. So we got to be really careful about this. It's a really long-winded answer, but we talk about the nameplate thing in particular a lot.
No. Well said. Absolutely. This one's from Ubiquitous. Okay, here's the big one. Are you holding back some specs intentionally early on, knowing what's coming later, rather than giving those specs the world straight out of the gate and then having to nerf them? For example, Shadow Priest, Enhanced Shaman, Ellie Shaman, Frost Mage.
I don't think that we're purposefully trying to hamstring or hold back certain classes. I think some classes just haven't come into their full form without their level 40 talents, having their entire kit of spells, and runes weren't going to change how those classes felt until they had those marquee spells and abilities. And then there's also the element of us, we want to make discoveries exciting. We want there to be an interesting discovery or adventure that players have to go on for certain runes, and we can only do so many of those, in an entire production cycle. So we have to figure out what runes we want to deliver, and hopefully some classes will feel more complete via talents and also have some fun runes to play along with as well.
Let me twist the wording for you, Josh. Sure. Josh, if you want to piggyback off of Tim's answer there, I'll change it to: has it been difficult developing the game in piecemeal fashion as you've done, while you know the really powerful stuff that's coming for us at 50 and 60?
I don't think it's been more difficult. It's probably easier because we've definitely done planning around like what runes are going to come online in which phases. And as Tim was saying, we didn't say, oh, we don't want to give you this because you'd be too strong with it. A lot of it is mostly just like, well, if we want this rune to impact something that you don't get until level 44, well, it's got to go into the level 50 bracket, you know what I mean? But having an idea of what we want when does help us, or what we know is coming when, what runes we know are coming online, has helped the content designers kind of be like, okay, these are the stories that I can tell later on that tie into this, or I have a cool idea for a discovery and it really works. You know, I could do it in the Barrens, but I think it might work better in Desolus. You know what I mean? So it's things like that. I think it helps having a plan, and we do definitely have a plan. But the plan does change. We've made adjustments and changes based on player feedback, but for the most part, we have an overarching
that
plan.
beautifully feeds into my next question. Well done. This one from Wonder saying, I'm sure player feedback has impacted or changed the runes that you've shipped. Can you provide an example of player feedback that did change your plans significantly?
I mean, the best example of that is right before we launched, we had gotten, everyone had seen the runes from BlizzCon, and we saw a lot of commentary. It wasn't really on the runes; it was on faction equality. There was a lot of commentary on like, oh, well, Alliance will have access to kings, but Horde won't. Now, being real, I don't know how many level 25 paladins would actually take Blessing of Kings in their talents. Like, I don't know many who actually would. They might if they didn't have another option, but I don't. It's not a particularly compelling choice whenever you only have 16 talent points to work with. However, we definitely recognized that, like, it's like, well, they at least have it available to them. Some paladin in the raid might take it, whereas the Horde wouldn't. And that's why we made the swap to put what was Aspect of the Lion became Heart of the Lion. We put that on we moved that into the level 25 bracket when we didn't intend for it to be there. We intended for it to be at 40. And so we swapped out, I think it was exposed weakness. We swapped with that. And that was basically directly based on player feedback. And that's the best example, I think. There's been a few others I can't think of. I don't know if you.
Well, there's probably phase two examples that we can't really talk about, right?
Yeah.
Well, some of the ones that we have announced, like the two-handed weapon specialization for shaman, those we sort of had an initial plan for how we wanted enhancement shaman to go, but the community wanted something in addition to that, and so we were happy to flex on our original design solutions there. Some of the plans, like Spirit of the Alpha, our answer for the Horde's version of Blessing of Salvation. People may have been asking for that, but we actually did have that planned well before launch. So, but we are listening,
right.
And
so is Spirit of the Alpha one of the great examples that we heard you guys talking about in phase one, where you could clearly hear the subtext was you guys tearing your hair out, just going like, just wait.
Yeah.
Basically. All right. Next one's from Manny. With the class identities of shamans and shaman, I should say, and paladins being increasingly blurred together and core abilities given to other classes, do you guys worry at all about the deteriorating faction identity and uniqueness, or do you even categorize it as a problem?
I'll take a stab at this and say that personally, I don't know if I want to necessarily speak for the team on this one, but I think personally, I feel that the faction identity is paladins for alliance and shamans for horde in original WoW. That's the important part. And I think the design intent, I think it's a pretty easy extrapolation to look at the abilities that paladins had, and the abilities that shamans had, and say that those were designed in a way that was a natural extension of their class role. Now, that said, though, there's no denying that there's an inequity in original WoW because of that. And so it's like, I think what we'd like to focus on is keeping the flavor of those classes in their faction, but tactically move some pieces of that kit around, just so it feels less bad if you're missing a key buff, or you don't feel like you can kind of compete with the same classes on the other faction because of some key buff that maybe isn't even a choice you opted into at character creation. It's just a thing that happened because your faction works the way it does or has the buffs it has.
Alrighty. Next one's from Zoran. This is a juicy one. If the team's okay with runes scaling with level, why not take the same approach with baseline spells? Are you doing anything to address spell ranks at the upcoming level caps, or are we going to be in a situation where baseline spells take a bit of a backseat to rune spells constantly?
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly having to come up with creative solutions to make Season of Discovery coexist in the same like development framework as Era and Hardcore. So
So
an enormous amount of work would have to be done in order to make all of the baseline spells scale in the same way that rune spells do, and simultaneously allow for all of the same spells to exist in the way that they currently do on Era. So, you know, eventually maybe there's some monumental task that we take to either separate the season from the Era and Hardcore framework, if that's something that makes sense production wise. But yeah, I think at each phase there is going to be a few rough edges in terms of, you know, maybe your marquee spell was a few ranks back or a few levels back that you got the latest rank for. At 60, everything tends to balance out. But we're sort of okay with those rough edges, and if they're rough edges in the extreme, that's something that we can figure out some improvements for.
We also really think it's okay for the meta and the way you play your class to change every couple months, right? Like that's kind of the whole point of this. And while it's like, oh well, you know, this rank of, I don't know, Mind Flay is 6 levels behind the level cap, I'm just not going to use Mind Flay. It's like, okay, maybe you just don't use Mind Flay, but it might become a mainstay. That's a bad example. Mind Flay probably won't be a huge mainstay of Too Many Priests kit, but you know what I mean. Like maybe it's a mainstay at 50, you know what I mean, and it's a little bit less. It's a filler at 40. And that, I think that's okay. And I think that actually leads to some more interesting gameplay, that it's like my rotation might change every couple levels, or my optimal order of abilities or order of operations changes a little bit every phase.
No, well said. I'm laughing because I brainstormed with a few of the guys, Hunk, Ubiquitous, and Punchy, last night about drafting this interview for you guys. And at a certain point, we were saying we think we can script some of these answers of what they're going to say, and we nailed that one. So well done. No, it was good to hear. It was good to hear.
High fives all around.
Yeah. No, vanilla friction is underlined. I get it. It's all good. Look, Alenia's got the next one, guys. Quick question about the Blood Moon event. Will there be any diminishing returns on killing the same player? Win trading is a concern.
Sure. So go ahead, Tim.
No, sure. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a concern. We have, by design, created the ability for players to self-police to an extent, right? Like, people who participate in this event in raid groups will be punished. You can't effectively participate in the event if you're in a group of more than 5. So that's off the table. However, you know, players will try to obviously find the most efficient way to grind out whatever currency, you know, grind the min-max the fun out of the feature. But we're hoping that the free-for-all nature of the event will allow for, you know, groups to find people who are participating in said win trading and just kill all of them. Just sort of mop the floor up with them. And if this does turn into something where it's obvious that people are finding creative ways to subvert sort of the spirit of this event, where we want people to be fighting each other like in competitive PvP, then we'll come up with other solutions to fight that type of behavior.
Yeah. I dare say that the folks who are looking to turn this into a PvE exercise or a non-PvP exercise, if those groups get rolled up on by a group that is looking to fight and is tooled up to fight, they're probably not going to have a super great time at it. So, you know, that might seem overly hopeful, you know what I mean? And we don't want to be naive about it. We're going in with eyes wide open of the potential problems with it. But, you know, I do also want to point out win trading and kill trading and stuff in PvP for rewards is actually against the rules. It's always been against the rules in WoW. So I would encourage you not to do that. And, you know, just like Ashenvale, if things don't work or if things don't play out the way we hope they will, we'll just make adjustments as time goes by.
Yeah, we'll be monitoring this closely and make adjustments on the fly.
Too easy. Speaking of the rules, we obviously had a bombshell dropped in regards to GDKPs. At the top of this episode, if people are hearing this on the podcast proper, you would have heard a spirited comedic skit by me in regards to the GDKP changes. But guys, I know you're going to want to answer this in a way that's just, we can't go into details, we can't tell you too much and all of that. But the Pepsi challenge is to give us some kind of a meaty answer here with this question from Tariak. Are you going to stand in the way of the rise of the Peace Bloom DKP now that GDKPs have gone the way of the Dodo?
I'm just going to say that there's a lot of players out there that are looking to create systems, and they all think they're very clever. They really do. They think they're very clever. They're not. They're not actually that clever. A horse by any other name is still a horse. There's not really going to be much like, oh, get us on a technicality for this here. Like, if you're doing this, we're going to know you're doing it, and we're going to take the action we said we're going to take. So
right. So that sounds like a common sense approach.
Yeah, and it's. Somebody dropped the legal analogy on me the other day that it was like a Supreme Court justice was like, it was some case, and I can't remember exactly. He couldn't remember exactly what it was, but it's like, I don't know how to define this, but I'll know it when I see it, kind of thing. And that's kind of the approach we're going to take. I'm not going to draw a box and say this is the box. Be within this box, or else, because then people are like,
DKP without gold. How are we ever going to find these people?
Yeah,
Goodness.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
They got us.
So, yeah.
Wasn't that something about Larry Flint and the definition of pornography? It was something like that.
Yeah, that was what it was. That was what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, too easy. Sorry, anything more? No, we'll move on. Okay, beautiful. Nailed it. Thank you. You did well. I was expecting we can't say anything, but you did it. Hey, here's a fun one. For real, no bullshit. Give us an insider take on the Hunter headache through phase 1.
Go, Josh.
Okay, I'll take this one. I don't know. The thing is I think we knew going into it that hunter pets would be really strong. We wanted them to be more strong. Like, hunter pets are kind of it was an interesting gameplay to kind of manage your pet and keep it alive in original WoW, but the reward for that investment was not that great, really. And so we definitely wanted to make them more powerful. And it sucks to nerf things. We don't want to nerf things. We'd rather buff things. But it was just a clear outlier. We just sort of swung a little too far. And it was something that was pretty difficult for us to kind of gauge internally. Like, we saw what damage numbers looked like relative to each other. But it's like, once you're in that group PvP setting, or even a 1v1 PvP setting, it can really spiral out of control really quickly. And that was just something that I think it was just a little bit of a miss. Like, I think we could have done a little bit better earlier on and been more conservative so that we could maybe buff instead of nerf. And so that's kind of just like a lesson, I guess, to take forward from that is maybe in our quest to make everyone feel strong and fun, maybe we went a little too far there. And that feels bad. We don't want to create that situation. But at the same point, they're still very strong. The nerfs didn't really actually hurt them all that much. Like, they're still very, very good.
I know.
And that's fine. We think it's okay if some classes situationally are very, very strong. That kind of goes back to, we want to try and make everyone feel OP in some way.
Also, as a team that doesn't normally do class changes, we're learning what our processes are, and we're going to try to become more predictable and more organized with the changes that we decide to make, and when we decide to make them, and how we communicate those changes. So
too easy. Has it been an emotional roller coaster for Morgan this whole phase?
She's had opinions about hunters in particular, for sure. Yeah, a little bit, but that's good. It keeps us grounded. We need lots of perspectives.
All right. Next one again from Ubiquitous. Hey, you two specifically, you guys were in the crowd as the Countdown crew sat down for 5 hours the other day and broke down everything that we heard. And one of the points we touched on was the Gnomeregon +2, +3 discussion in regards to the bosses. Soon after that, look, whether or not this is a thing, we seem to see some of the items that we might have access to from Gnomeregon change a little bit. Tongue in cheek, was there any correlation between you guys hearing that discussion and those moves? But more importantly, will the bosses be +2 or +3 in Gnomeregon?
+2.
Yeah,
Plus
but
two.
that was always the plan, by the way.
Mhm.
I think as some of the changes you saw, like for example, like weapon skill going from +5 to +3 on some items, that was really because when we sat down and thought about it, it's like, oh, we don't need +5 right now because the bosses are +2, and the difference between +5 weapon skill and +3 weapon skill is something like a quarter of a percent chance to hit, and I think like 9 or 10% extra like reduced damage from glancing blows. It's very minimal, but at 60, when mobs like in bosses are +3 levels above, that 5 weapon skill is massive. And so we want to be really careful. Like we started out, some of those items maybe started out in a stronger or weaker state. And as time went by, and when we do natural tuning of items, you see the results of that. Especially with the PTR, like A, some of that stuff isn't real, and B, some of that stuff you actually saw like very old versions of it, and it took a while for the hot fixes and other changes we made in more recent weeks to catch up on PTR.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really it. It's a lot more mundane and a lot less interesting than you think. It's mostly just you just get to see a little bit more of the natural sort of tuning process as we go through it. Through that data mining.
Too easy. One word answer, both of you. Which class are you most excited to see phase 2 reactions roll in for?
It's not a one-word answer, but I'll keep it short. I'm excited to see how mages incorporate spells like Bale Firebolt and Spell Frost into any of their rotations, whether it's Arcane, Frost, or Fire.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say a specific class name because then everyone's just going to be like, "That's going to be the best class." I don't know. No. I'm with Tim though. I think Tim and I were talking about this earlier. That it's like it'd be interesting to see hybrid builds, and it's like, are any classes going to eschew their 31-point talent and go for some sort of like 15-16 build? Like it'd be really interesting to see that. I want to see how that stuff's actually.
Too easy. You didn't take the bait. Well done. Really, really quick, and then we'll get to the lightning round. If you could go back 4 months in the DeLorean and tell yourself about phase 1 and the development work you did on it, what would you change non-Ashen Veil category?
I think I would have liked to had Akumai be a little more difficult compared to the rest of the instance. Have it be more challenging than Kelris, perhaps. But I would say overall, I think the difficulty of BFD landed pretty well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think, going back to the hunter thing, I think I would have probably tried to start a little bit more conservative with some of the runes. There's a couple classes I maybe would have looked at like systemic changes to, just before we even started. I'm not going to name names, but you could probably figure out if you think long and hard about it, which I might be referring to. Yeah, I mean, overall, we're over the moon with how it's gone so far. I don't think it could have gone much better. I mean, it could always be better, right? But like perfect isn't the enemy of good. And I think that it played out pretty well.
Too easy. All right, guys, the lightning round. Last couple of minutes here. I'm going to try and squeeze everything I can out of this. Maybe we get an extra minute because of Tim's wardrobe snafu. Hey, will you shut higher level dungeons off in phase 2, such as Sunken Temple? Yes, no, or can't say?
Yes.
Okay.
Everything above Uldaman will be turned off.
Beautiful. Is there something notable we did not find in phase 1?
Maybe.
Oh,
I'm not sure if either of us would actually know. Like,
yeah.
the content people probably know, but I don't think. Maybe.
All right. Well, you can hit them up and send me a follow-up answer. Will bosses in... Oh, this is the big one. Will bosses in Gnomeregan be immune to bleeds and poisons?
No, they won't.
Oh.
But for fantasy, there will be a slight penalty to poisons, diseases, and bleeds. Nothing super significant, but we want people to be able to play the specializations and classes that they want and not feel overly penalized in a mechanical heavy instance.
Very good.
It won't be as punishing as early BFD was before we made adjustments.
Too easy. Will backtracking for runes, such as finding runes in places we've already spent a lot of time in phase 1, be a thing?
No.
Okay.
You may have to go back to some zones that you've been to before, but primarily the adventures and discoveries that we want people to be in should be centered around the level 25 to 40 zones.
Okay. Will we see a gold sync rune again? Maybe.
Likely. Well, maybe. Probably not a gold sync rune, but we are actively talking about gold syncs, and there are some gold syncs in phase 2.
Good.
Not necessarily rune related, though.
No, you love to hear it. That's good. STV mount. We'll have mounts anyway, but is that only usable in STV?
No, it's usable everywhere.
Okay, beautiful. Last two questions, guys. Who on the classic team is first on your hit list for Blood Moon? And I remind you, you're under oath.
I think we'd only be able to answer that question if magically all of us were on the same server somehow, but we all seem to accidentally roll on completely different servers. So
All right.
I'd say Morgan, but I don't think I could take. I don't think I could take her if I found her. So,
All right.
you know,
All right. Here we go. Last question. Tim, do you or the team often suggest paladin nerfs that a Grend immediately vetoes?
I'm gonna let him answer this, but I have something to expand on. Go ahead.
never. No, we would never nerf paladin.
Yeah, not under a Grend's iron fist with paladins.
If you think of any paladin nerf that has happened, I'm probably the one who suggested it.
Oh, here we go.
That's
This is
not untrue. That
propaganda.
Is yeah.
Absolute propaganda. All right, guys, we're going to wind it up there. That's pretty much it. I can't thank you enough for obviously spending time with the Countdown community the way you have. I'm not sure who your favorite Countdown caller is in season 6 of Countdown, whether you're a hunk man or a ubiquitous kind of guy, but I'm glad that you guys have been there listening in. Thank you so much. As always, this has been a blast.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you, Josh. It's a pleasure.